The dining room exploded with applause, cheers, and even a few whistles. One relative shouted, "Finally!" I didn't join in the clapping. I didn't react at all. I simply offered the kind of faint smile you give when a sudden downpour starts, but you already know the umbrella belongs to someone else. I gently placed my fork down. "Dad," I said quietly, "should I explain it to everyone, or would you prefer to do it?" His color drained instantly. My sister went rigid. In that frozen second, the whole table sensed that something big was about to surface. Before I continue with what unfolded after that heavy pause, let me ask, where are you reading this from tonight? It helps to know there are others out there who have survived families like mine. My name is Emily Nolan, and if you had seen my family before that Thanksgiving, you might have believed we were tight-knit. The classic Midwestern image people share on holiday greetings, coordinated outfits, wide smiles in front of a decorated tree, acting as though we never once raised our voices. But families like mine don't shatter with dramatic bangs. They fracture quietly, through tiny decisions, through whose voice gets heard and whose gets overlooked. For as long as I can recall, I've occupied that silent corner where people only notice you when they want something. Jenna, my younger sister, never had to live in that corner. She was the favorite, vibrant, outgoing, overflowing with charisma. The type of daughter aunts and uncles gush over at gatherings, labeling her a born star and a delight. I never resented her for it. I simply learned young that I would need to construct my own future, because nothing would ever be freely given to me the way it was to her. Growing up, I watched my parents invest endless energy in Jenna as if she were a delicate flower requiring constant care. Ballet lessons, summer programs, private tutoring, things they claimed were unaffordable whenever I expressed interest. Later, when I relocated to Chicago for my career, they labeled it selfish, as though pursuing my own path meant I was deserting them. Meanwhile, Jenna remained nearby, dropping by every weekend, fitting perfectly into the ideal role they had shaped for her. Still, I continued returning home for holidays, mainly for my grandmother. Evelyn Nolan, sharp-witted, silver-haired, the only family member who truly saw me and showed genuine pride. When she embraced me at the door, it never felt dutiful. It felt like being truly recognized. She would pat my cheek and murmur something like, "You're tougher than they realize," before returning to her seat, as if she hadn't just provided me with enough strength to carry on for another year. This particular Thanksgiving felt off from the very start. The atmosphere inside the house was unusual, heavy, charged, as though everyone had been clued into a secret I was deliberately kept from. Mom bustled in the kitchen with that strained smile she uses when concealing something major. Dad avoided eye contact beyond a fleeting glance. Jenna kept smoothing imaginary specks from her dress, though it was spotless. And as I entered the dining room, I noticed something else. The chair that usually sat beside mine was simply gone, not shifted, not tucked away, completely absent. I should have recognized the warning then. You'd think the missing chair would have been clue enough, but in my family, warnings are always subtle before they detonate. I took my seat regardless, straightening my napkin on my lap, acting as if I hadn't registered how conversations dipped whenever I walked in. They would flatten for a moment, like someone had hit mute, then resume with exaggerated cheer the instant I moved past. Jenna glided around like the centerpiece of her own celebration, adjusting place settings, tweaking the floral arrangement, sharing hushed comments with Mom that sparked shared smiles. Every now and then she'd glance my way with a thin, courteous smile, polite yet empty, like I was a colleague she hardly knew. It hadn't always been this way. For years, Jenna and I were simply two sisters sharing a room, slipping notes under the door after lights out. She used to braid my hair, borrow my clothes without asking, and plead with me to chauffeur her once I had my driver's license. But somewhere between teenage years and adulthood, the dynamic changed. She settled comfortably into the golden child persona my parents had crafted for her, while I quietly faded from the spotlight. The house issue began 6 months earlier, well before the Thanksgiving revelation. It was a sticky Saturday in June when Mom phoned, urging me to come home for something urgent. No specifics, no heads up. When I arrived, they guided me directly to the dining table, the same table where everything would later unravel. Dad had a thick folder arranged like a business pitch. Mom grinned too broadly, as if the effort hurt. "Honey," Dad started, "we're refinancing the house. It's just a quick signature, lower interest rates, nothing for you to worry about." Even then, my instincts tightened. My family never sought my assistance unless they were hiding the full extent of their need. I scanned the documents, pulse quickening as I struggled to decipher the figures. Something seemed wrong, too many pages, too many redacted sections, too many hurried justifications. "May I take these home?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "My attorney can review them." The silence that followed revealed everything. Mom's grin wafted. Dad closed the folder abruptly, as though he regretted showing it at all. "It's purely routine," he pressed. "No need to overcomplicate." But I took the folder anyway. Back in Chicago, my lawyer paged through it, her brows climbing with every sheet. She didn't soften the news. She phoned me the following morning. "This isn't a refinance," she stated plainly. "It's a transfer of obligation. Signing would make you liable for their debts." "Debt?" I stared at the receiver, stunned. "What debt?" She explained patiently. A hidden second mortgage, repeated missed payments, foreclosure warnings, things I had never suspected existed. In that instant, something inside me solidified. Not rage, not yet. Something cooler, something resolute. 2 months later, Dad called again, this time requesting funds outright. Not a loan, not assistance. Cash. He claimed it was for Mom's health expenses, but when I offered to settle the bills directly with the providers, his story crumbled. The excuses shifted. The reality emerged. Overdue amounts, looming deadlines, panic. And now, seated at that Thanksgiving table, watching Jenna bask in the spotlight, the burden of those 2 months pressed against my chest. They weren't gifting her the house. They were offloading the liability, and they expected me to remain silent while it happened. By November, the unspoken truth hung between my parents and me like a live current. We avoided mentioning the documents I had declined to sign or the conversation where Dad finally confessed. Our talks shrank to surface topics. Whether my job, as though pleasantries could paper over the gaping hole. They were unaware that I had gone further than refusing. I obtained the public property records myself. I knew the full extent. The second mortgage, the compounding interest, the foreclosure timeline already in motion. They were sinking and attempting to pull someone else down with them. At first, I assumed I had always been the intended target. The daughter with the steady income in the city, no children, the one they viewed as an automatic fallback they deserved. Refusing them felt like speaking a foreign tongue flavored with guilt. Then Jenna began dropping hints on social media, posts about major life shifts, pictures on the porch with our parents, lighthearted remarks about soon becoming a homeowner. Each update clicked another piece into place. A week before Thanksgiving, Mom called to rave about how thrilled Jenna was to host more gatherings once the house matter was finalized. She mentioned it casually, as if the property were a cherished keepsake rather than a ticking explosive wrapped in ribbon. That was the evening I stopped waiting for them to resolve it themselves. I sat at my desk, opened a new folder, and began compiling copies. Overdue statements, official notices, summary sheets detailing exactly how severe the situation was. I didn't intend to shame them publicly. I intended to ensure no one could later claim ignorance. On Thanksgiving morning, I drove home with that folder in my tote and a tight knot in my gut. Part of me still wished they would pull me aside privately, admit the scheme had gone too far. Instead, Mom greeted me at the door with a stiff embrace that carried notes of perfume and tension. "You look lovely," she said. "Jenna will be so glad you're here." The emphasis on Jenna, not us, said it all. Inside, the table was beautifully set. Extra extensions, gleaming crystal, every seat occupied except the one meant for me. My grandmother caught my gaze from her regular spot and offered a subtle nod, as if she sensed more than she let on. As I settled into my place, my fingers grazed the side of my bag. Paper rustling against fabric, evidence against denial. If they were staging this meal as a theatrical production, I was finished playing the silent supporting role. When my sister stood and tapped her glass, I already knew I was about to witness the grand reveal of a scene they had rehearsed without me. Jenna glowed under the chandelier, hair perfectly styled, wearing the necklace our grandmother had given her, sparkling as if selected especially for her triumphant moment. "Mom and Dad are signing the house over to me," she proclaimed, voice ringing clear across every dish and goblet. "Emily gets nothing." The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. Cheers, vigorous applause, several whistles, and the relieved laughter of people convinced they were witnessing something fair. Someone actually patted Dad on the back. My mother dabbed at her eyes as though watching a proposal. I didn't lift my glass. I didn't even blink. I simply looked at Jenna and offered a small, measured smile, not broad, not kind, the sort that carries everything still unsaid. Then I set my fork down with deliberate care and asked, "Dad, should I tell them or will you?" The impact was instantaneous. It was as if my words severed a vital chord. The room plunged into a silence so dense I could hear the old radiator clank. Dad's hand trembled. His fork struck the plate with a sharp ring. Jenna's face tightened. "Tell us what?" Relatives leaned in, sensing conflict. My grandmother let out a slow breath, as though she had long awaited someone to end the charade. I reached into my bag, withdrew the folder, and set it before me. I didn't open it yet. I simply let it rest there, a silent warning. "Before you all celebrate Jenna receiving the house," I said evenly, "you might want to understand its actual state." Dad attempted to regain control. "Emily, not now." "Why not?" I replied. "You weren't shy about transferring it to her without mentioning the debt." Head swiveled, chatter ceased, Jenna straightened, defensive. "What debt?" she demanded. I opened the folder at last. A pile of statements, invoices, and delinquency notices faced the table. I slid one sheet forward, the summary highlighted in bold. "They're behind on payments," I explained. "On 2 mortgages, the second was taken secretly. Foreclosure could be weeks away." My mother's hand flew to her lips. Dad flushed deeply. Jenna stared as though struck. "That can't be right," she insisted, voice climbing. "They would have told me." "Did they tell you," I asked, holding her gaze, "that the house carries more than $100,000 in liabilities? That accepting the deed makes you personally responsible for every late payment and fee?" A fracture appeared in her composure. Uncertainty took root. Dad tried again. "You're exaggerating, Emily. We're managing it." "Are you?" I countered, lifting another document. "Because this letter from the bank suggests otherwise." He reached forward as if to grab the page in front of everyone. I drew it back just in time. "Stop," Mom pleaded. "Please, not today." "Why not today?" I returned. "You picked this day." The relatives began fidgeting, some uneasy, some newly intrigued, a few openly upset at being dragged into unexpected drama. My Aunt Diane spoke first. "Daniel," she said firmly, "is this accurate?" Dad stayed silent, jaw locked. Mom hid behind her napkin. Jenna glanced between them and me. "But they promised the house was mine." "It was never a gift," I answered gently. "It was their exit strategy. They needed someone to assume the debt. They tried me first. When I refused, they turned to you." Jenna stood trembling in her sparkling outfit. Her fiancé, Tyler, subtly shifted away as though reconsidering his proximity. "Is she making this up?" he asked my parents. Mom sobbed. Dad avoided eye contact. That silence was answer enough. Tyler rose abruptly. "You told me the mortgage was paid in full. You said we'd start fresh." Jenna reached for him, but he stepped back. "You expect me to build a future on quicksand?" "Tyler, please," he shook his head. "I'm not signing up for this." The room inhaled sharply as he left, past the untouched turkey, past my shell-shocked parents, out the door without a backward glance. Jenna's knees buckled. She sank into her chair, hands shaking, makeup streaking her face. For the first time in years, she resembled the frightened little girl who once sought comfort in my bed after bad dreams. "This isn't my fault," she whispered. "I didn't know." "I know," I replied softly. Dad pounded the table. "You've destroyed everything." I met his eyes. "No, you destroyed everything the moment you tried to pass your financial mess to your daughters like it was an inheritance." "You're ripping this family apart," Mom cried. "It was already torn," I said. "I'm simply done hiding the damage." A low murmur spread among the guests, some nodding in agreement, others expressing disapproval, the kind amplified by having impartial witnesses. My grandmother rose slowly, steadying herself on the table. Though her voice was frail, it commanded attention. "I raised you better than this," she told my father. "Your children are not rescue rafts for you to board." Dad deflated. Mom wept harder. Jenna finally looked at me, eyes vacant. "What do I do now?" The question struck deeper than intended. Not because I held all the answers, but because she was at last asking the sister they had sidelined instead of the parents who fed her fantasies. Before I could respond, a firm knock sounded at the door. Everyone turned. The knock repeated stronger. Dad frowned. "Who?" The door opened, and a woman entered, plain business attire, badge visible, expression professional and neutral. "Mr. and Mrs. Nolan?" she inquired. "I need to discuss your mortgage records." The room erupted once more, this time in stunned whispers. Mom nearly fainted. Dad paled completely. Jenna gripped the table edge for support. I remained still, breathing evenly, watching reality finally settle where it belonged. "Why is she here?" Dad asked hoarsely. The investigator didn't waver. "We received a report of possible financial irregularities. I have some questions." Silence fell like a curtain. No one cheered now. "Emily," Mom sobbed, "tell her it's a misunderstanding, please." I stayed quiet for the moment, because the full truth was only starting to emerge. When the investigator entered fully, The fragile scaffolding holding my parents' facade finally collapsed. She posed calm, precise questions about missed payments, hidden loans, and each evasion shrank the room further. Relatives edged away as if avoiding contagion. Jenna sat motionless, color drained, hands trembling in her lap. My grandmother stood behind her, one steadying hand on her shoulder.